Section 8 of Orpheus with His Lute by W.M.L. Hutchinson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Prince Cadmus of Phoenicia. It was now midwinter, and on the night of full moon, Orpheus had sat late in the warm glow of the log fire, listening to the talk of some of the woodmen who were come to roast chestnuts and drink a cup of wine at his father's hearth. And at his waking in the enchanted glade, he asked that he might hear next the adventures of King Cadmus. One of the 9 looked up from the rose garland she sat weaving, and bade him say why he chose that tale. "Because, lady," said he, "the woodmen spoke tonight of some good fortune that has come to a neighbor, and they said he was as lucky as King Cadmus. I asked who Cadmus was, and they told me his name was an old byword in the country, because the gods made him the luckiest of all men, but they knew no more of him except that he was a king of Thebes in the ancient days." "Tell him, dear Erato," said Calliope to her with the roses, "tell him how Cadmus came by that name of Fortunate, which indeed he deserved more than any mortal. For it is a pleasant hearing, and his high good fortune was a gift from the goddess, whose dealings with men are your chosen theme for song." Erato shook the roses from her lap, and beckoning Orpheus to her side, she began the tale in tones more honey-sweet and low than he had heard from any of the sisters. In Phoenicia, land of palms, there was once a king who had 7 sons and 1 daughter, his youngest born. This maiden, whose name was Europa, was as beautiful as the day, the apple of her father's eye, and the darling of the 7 princes, her brothers. Her mother died when she was but a child, and for her sake the king would take no second wife. Such tales had he heard of stepdames and their cruel ways, but gave the little princess into the care of nurses and handmaids, to whom she ever showed herself so gentle and gracious that they loved her with all their hearts. It came to pass, when Europa was a maiden grown, that she went with her women to gather saffron in the meadows on a morn of spring. And as they busily plucked the crocus flowers, laden with the orange saffron dust, they saw a stately bull, as white as snow, come pacing towards them through the mead, lowing as he came. Europa's handmaids drew aside with little cries of alarm as the mighty creature came nearer, and stood regarding them with his great flashing eyes. But the princess cried, "Be not afraid, my maidens. See how quietly he stands, as though to tell us he means no harm. He's a gentle beast and tame, perhaps the king of some temple herd, for see how glossy is his milk-white coat, and his horns are gilded." With that she went close to the bull, and stroked his dark velvety muzzle, and said, laughing, "Ah, king of bulls, methinks you are proud of your beauty, and are come to show it us." The bull lowed softly, and knelt at Europa's feet, bowing his splendid head to the very ground. "Here is a steed fit for a princess," she said merrily, and in girlish frolic she seated herself upon his back, and bade him carry her to the seashore nigh at hand. Forthwith the bull rose up and bore the princess onwards with slow, majestic gait, the while she grasped with one hand his golden horn, and looked back, laughing, to her maidens, who followed, marveling. Thus rode she, as it were in festal pomp, a coronal of crocus on her bright hair, even to the sea's marge, and now the bull walked sedately along the edge of the tide, dipping his hoofs in the shallow sparkling waves. "Princess," cried the handmaids, "will you not turn back? We have come far already, and it is time we were making homeward." But if Europa answered, they heard her not, for with a far resounding mighty bellow, the bull plunged suddenly into the waves, and swimming more swiftly than a dolphin, bore his rider far out to seaward. Before the terrified women could draw breath to cry out, Europa's white mantle was but a speck upon the violet deep, and while they shrieked and wrung their helpless hands, their mistress was lost to sight among the distant billows. Words would fail to tell the grief of the king and all his house when those weeping handmaids came home with their tidings. It was plain to the king that he who had carried off his daughter was no bull, but an enchanter who had taken that shape to entice her away. "I grow old and feeble," he said to his sons, "or I would myself go forth into the world to find Europa, and bid you all go likewise. But as it is, I cannot leave my kingdom, and have need of strong helpers to rule my folk. This, then, I am resolved upon. 6 of you shall bide here with me, but Cadmus, the youngest, shall go in quest of his sister across the sea, and I charge him, on pain of a father's curse, that he never return to Phoenicia until the lost is found." Prince Cadmus was a youth of a dauntless spirit, and he set sail with good hope upon his quest, doubting not to achieve it in the end. But the gods willed otherwise, for though he traveled far and wide in the western lands beyond the sea, not one word could he hear of an enchanter or a captive princess. At last he heard report of the ancient and renowned temple that is in Delphi, and he journeyed thither with his train to inquire of the oracle. And Apollo's priestess, having entered the inmost shrine, cloudy with fragrant incense, where none but she may set foot, thus spake to him from her golden chair of prophecy: "Prince of Phoenicia, seek no more thy sister Europa. Forget also thine own people and thy father's house, for it is well with the maid, and she dwells even now in a glorious island home, no captive but a queen. There, in no long time, shall her aged father behold her again with joy. But to thee the gods appoint this land of strangers for an abiding place, and will give thee a goodly heritage therein. Go now forth of my sanctuary, and thou shalt see a white heifer grazing by the wayside. Follow whither she goes, and in the place where she shall first lie down, I bid thee build straightway a fenced city." Then Cadmus, trusting in Apollo's word, went forth and followed that white heifer. Albeit it seemed to him a hard saying that he must build a fenced city, having for companions but a handful of slaves. 3 days and nights the heifer led them slowly southward and eastward, and all the while they kept watch to see if she lay down when she paused to rest or browse, but she did not. Then came they into a valley of rich pastures, set about with wooded hills, and the heifer turned not aside into the pastures, but held straight on to a little hill that stood forth into the valley, between 2 streams, and on the top of that she lay down. "Here, then," said Cadmus, "is the place where I must build my city, but first we will build an altar and sacrifice this heifer to the god at Delphi." So saying, he began to pile up stones and sods of turf for an altar, and bade his slaves bring him wood for the fire, and pure water to sprinkle the victim, as the manner was. They had been gone but a brief while, when Cadmus heard shrieks of anguish from a grove at the foot of the hill, and hurrying thither, saw his men burst with blanched faces out of the dense underwood. "Fly, Lord, fly," they cried. "There is a dragon by the well yonder, and he has slain 2 of us already. Away, away, or we are all dead men." But the prince drew his sword and flew to encounter the monster. Now the well in the grove was a sacred fount of Ares, the war god, who had set to guard it the hugest of dragons, with coat of emerald scales and lidless fiery eyes that knew not sleep. And when the slaves approached the fount to draw water, that fell warder sprang from his lair and seized 2 ere they could flee with his devouring jaws. But swift vengeance did Cadmus take upon their slayer, for like lightning he rushed on the gorged monster and smote off his head with one blow of his good sword. Then was he ware of one that stood beside him in shining armor, of more than mortal stature, wearing a golden helm on her golden hair, and grasping a tall spear. It was the goddess Athena, who ever loves the brave. "Well done, valiant prince," she said. "I see you are one of those who fear naught else because they fear the gods. Now shall you reap such harvest of this deed as never man did yet. Take the dragon's teeth and sow them broadcast on the ground." The wondering prince obeyed, and no sooner had he done so than, behold, ranks of armed men sprang from the teeth, as it were ranks of bristling corn from seed in the furrow. And they fought furiously one with another, till all but 7 were slain. Then Athena waved her spear, and those 7 lowered their weapons and stood still. "You have seen, Cadmus," said the goddess, "how mightily these champions overcame the rest, and that the strength of each is as the strength of 10 who are born of woman. With the help of this dragon seed you shall build your city and defend it from all adversaries, and from them in turn shall spring a race of doughty spearmen who will make the city of Cadmus renowned in war through ages yet to come." With these words she departed, but Cadmus led the 7 champions to the hilltop, and with them to aid he set about building the city, which in aftertime was called the city of Thebes. There my tale leaves him for a while to tell of the princess Europa. Swifter than ship can sail, the white bull swam with her to the great island of Crete, and on that strange voyage the maiden felt no fear, for a sweet drowsiness stole over her, so that she closed her eyes in slumber. When she awoke, she lay upon an unknown strand, under a clear heaven of stars, and a beautiful youth stood before her, whose golden raiment glittered in the starlight. "Ah, prince," she cried, "where am I, and where is the bull that carried me hither?" "You will see him no more, sweet Europa," answered the stranger youth, "for I am he. A powerful enchanter of this island slew the king, my father, and changed me by his wicked art into the form of a beast, never, he said, to quit it, until I could bring hither the fairest princess in the world. This I have done, and the spell is broken, as you see." "Tell me your name," said the princess, casting down her eyes. "I am called Asterios, the star prince," said he, "for the star Sirius waxed brighter when I was born, which sign the priests interpreted to foretell a life of wondrous splendor. But now, unless you can find it in your heart to pity me, I look my last on him with human eyes. Such was the enchanter's malice, that he doomed me to become a bull again for 1,000 years, unless that fairest princess would straightway marry me." "And if she would, what then?" asked Europa. "Then," said Asterios, "there would be an end of that foul wizard. It is his fate to perish utterly if any of his victims can accomplish the task he sets them." The princess rose up, and giving her hand to the star prince, "Lead home your bride, Asterios," she said, "for I am yours from this hour." So there was great joy that night in the palace of the star prince, and those two were wedded with high pomp. But as for the enchanter, he was never seen or heard of more. King Asterios sent messengers with royal gifts to Europa's father, and when the old man heard their tidings, he gave the kingdom of Phoenicia to his sons, and returned with the messengers to Crete, where he dwelt with his loved daughter till his death, joying in her splendid lot. Ere long, 3 noble sons were born to Queen Europa, of whom Minos, the eldest, became in aftertime a king so wise and great that the king of gods himself deigned to take counsel with him, as with a familiar friend. And so it was rumored in Crete that King Minos was the son of Zeus, who had carried away Europa in the likeness of a bull, and wedded her in the likeness of Prince Asterios. But the truth is as I have told. Now turn we again to Cadmus in his new-built city. It fell on a day that he went hunting in the hills, and gave chase to a huge bristled boar of many winters. And the boar turned savagely at bay, the foam flying from his fearsome tusks. But Cadmus hurled his javelin at the charging beast with aim so true that it pierced bone and brain between the eyes, and he crashed to earth stone dead. Then stepped quickly from the greenwood a lady divinely fair, crowned with fresh roses, and came to the young prince's side, and thanked him in sweetest tones, because he had slain her deadly enemy. And he asked her who she was, and what feud she had with the boar. "Sit on this mossy bank beside me," said the rose-crowned lady, "and I will tell you how much cause I have to hate him. In these hills a youth was once wont to hunt. Adonis was his name, whom both I and all who saw him loved for his flower-like beauty. Nay, there was no beast of the forest that would harm that lovely boy, till on a fatal day he roused yonder gray miscreant from his lair. That morn I had besought Adonis even with tears to forbear the chase, for my heart was heavy with presage of misfortune, but he would not heed, and parted from me laughing at my fears. Alas, alas! And when I saw him at eve, he lay cold and dead, bathed in the blood those cruel tusks had drawn from his tender side." "Ah, lady," said Cadmus, sighing, "would I might comfort you, but words are idle breath, and sorrow for the dead is without cure." "Nay, gentle prince," said she, "some comfort I have, and for your kindly wish you shall hear what it is. I who speak to you am Aphrodite, a goddess not without renown in earth and heaven, and at my prayer the awful fates granted that my Adonis should come back to life each year with the coming of the flowers. All the dark winter he lies in breathless trance, housed within the secret chamber of my temple far away, but all the time of roses we wander together wherever forest bowers are greenest, and singing birds make sweetest music." As she thus spoke, Aphrodite's countenance took on rosier bloom, and she smiled with a tenderness divine. Then came a beating of wings among the treetops, and an ivory car floated to earth at her feet, drawn by white doves. The goddess mounted the car, and holding forth her pearly hand to Cadmus, "Take this ring from my finger," she said, "in guerdon for what you have done. It will bring you the bride you have set your heart on, be she who she may." Cadmus took the ring, which was set with a great ruby, and forthwith the doves spread their pinions and soared aloft, bearing Aphrodite far into the blue. And the prince, having hung the ring about his neck by the golden chain he wore, because it was too small for his smallest finger, betook him home again. Not many nights after, he sat feasting in his hall with those 7 champions, sprung from the dragon's teeth, and they who had taken themselves wives of the daughters of the land began to say among themselves that it was full time their prince was wedded also. Presently one of them made bold to tell him so. "That may be," said Cadmus, "but I have seen no maiden I desire for my bride. Nor am I like to, for a king's son should wed with king's blood, and there is never a princess in all this land." Then, below his breath, he said, "Could I have my wish, it would be to wed a bride as fair as Aphrodite." The whisper had scarce passed his lips when the door of the hall flew open, and a white-robed company entered with garlands and lighted torches, singing, as they came, a bridal song. In the midst walked a veiled maiden in glorious apparel, crowned with myrtle, and she that led her by the hand was none other than Aphrodite. "You have put my gift to proof, Cadmus," said the goddess, smiling on the astonished prince, and not till then did he remember the ruby ring that he wore still about his neck. "I am come with these my kinsfolk," she continued, "to bestow on you the bride you wished for but now, a maiden fair as myself. Look on her face, and tell me if you can choose between us." So saying, she threw back the maiden's veil, and Cadmus saw one who seemed the very twin of Aphrodite, save that she was in the earliest bloom of girlhood. "Ah, brightest goddess," he cried, "what magic is this you have wrought? Surely I dream. There cannot be a maid so like you in earth or heaven." "There is but one," answered Aphrodite, "and she is my child Harmonia, who stands before you. Come, take her by the hand, for this is no dream, but waking truth, and see, your guests wait beside the marriage altar." Cadmus looked around him, and still he doubted if he were not dreaming, for his hall was become a trellised bower of roses and blooming myrtle. Garlands of starry jasmine twined the rafters, and the purple broideries that decked the couches were hidden under showers of rose petals and violets. Beside the hearth stood an altar of pure gold, heaped with burning frankincense, and amid the fragrant clouds that rose therefrom shone a crowd of divine faces. There Cadmus and his men beheld in their majesty the brother kings of heaven and sea, and the laureled head of bright Apollo, and gray-eyed Athena, with golden helm, and Queen Hera, glorious bride of Zeus. Nor these alone, but time would fail to tell of all that heavenly throng. Awestruck, the prince remained mute while Aphrodite placed her child's right hand in his and led them to where Hera stood. "Queen of wedlock," she said, "I, who am queen of love, desire your blessing and favor for these two." Then, as they bent before her, great Hera touched the forehead of bridegroom and bride with her golden scepter, murmuring mystic words, and she bade them plight their troth one to the other, calling to witness King Zeus and his lady, and the household altar, and the hearth of their homes, which, when they had done, Apollo struck his glittering lyre, making joyous melody, and the 9 sisters, whom men call the Muses, raised again the choral marriage song. Meanwhile the rest, mortals and immortals, were marshaled by Hermes, with his herald staff, to their due places on the flower-strewn couches, where they feasted on all manner of delicious fare, from vessels of gold and crystal, which hands unseen set upon the tables. Then, having bestowed gifts upon the bride, the heavenly guests were gone from the hall as suddenly as they had entered. Such a wedding had Cadmus and Harmonia, and by Hera's grace they loved each other faithfully to their lives' end. Now they reigned prosperously in Thebes for many years, and surpassing wealth was theirs, for the marriage gifts the gods brought to Aphrodite's child were golden coffers full of pearls and precious gems, the least of which might have been the captain jewel in a king's crown. And Cadmus saw the city he had built become mighty in the land, a city of mail-clad men valiant in war, who were sprung from the seed of the dragon. But for all this he did not escape the lot that comes to all of mortal birth. It is well said of the wise that for every good a man receives at the hand of the gods, he must likewise receive 2 evils. For this proved true even of him who wedded the daughter of a goddess, and was called, with reason, the most fortunate of men. Here Erato paused, and turning to a blue-eyed sister who held a tambourine, she said, "I have left my tale half told, for I see sunrise will be here before I could make an end. But you, Terpsichore, can tell the rest on the 8th night, if you so choose." "It is for Orpheus to choose," cried Terpsichore in a fresh and ringing voice. How say you, child? Will you hear what befell King Cadmus in his latter years, and of one born in Thebes, for whose sake I take joy in that story above all others?" The boy eagerly murmured his assent as the moment of parting came, and on the 8th night Terpsichore took up the tale in these words. End of Prince Cadmus of Phoenicia. Read by Mark Harrington, Framingham, Massachusetts.